Welcome back, or welcome if you're just joining us. This is The World This Week, and joining us, Ulrike Kollermann, German journalist based here in Paris. Thank you for being with us. Thanks again for joining us, Tanguy Salin of the Reuters news agency, Craig Capidis, author of Mona Lisa's Pajamas, and Dave Clark of the French news agency AFP. Dave, who's been in the past posted in Baghdad, Lagos, he's prepared for now a treacherous posting inside the Beltway,
yes.
Washington, D.C. I hope you're ready for it, Dave.
Yes, no, I'm looking forward to it. I move out next week, and the family follows me a week afterwards.
And you're bringing your flak jacket?
I'm bringing my helmet, I'm bringing my boots.
Okay, well, we're going to, in a moment, get you to weigh in on this. What was billed as the signature piece of legislation of a Democratic president running for re-election versus a conservative-led U.S. Supreme Court, one critics labeled as an activist court. But in the end, margin, enabling tens of millions of previously uninsured Americans to access health care. The swing vote coming from a surprise quarter, the usually conservative Chief Justice John Roberts. And I guess before I go to Dave Clark, I'm going to go to Craig Capidis, because we on this very set on Thursday, we were discussing this, and virtually everyone said that they predicted it wrong.
Well, they did. And as Winston Churchill said, all great things are simple. This is not. I happened to watch your show on Thursday, and the most fascinating part of that show was the gentleman, I believe it was from Sciences Po, who had been consulting with the Obama administration.
From the Sorbonne, yeah.
Yeah, and from the Sorbonne, excuse me, on how to create a more equitable healthcare system. You know, he sounded like, you know, he just returned from the Klingon Empire. Talk about a disconnect. Those of us who live here will never understand how they think there, and the folks who live there will never understand how we think here about healthcare. It's a complete difference of perception. The American.
So do you think the United States is now a little bit more a European-style social democracy?
No, I think that the moment the Supreme Court did the old switcheroo and called this mandate a tax, which is the dirtiest word you can say in the United States, that it changed. Remember, that there's so many ways to approach this, but let's try to approach it from the mind of how those there are looking at it. What the Supreme Court said was that Congress can't force you to do anything you don't want to do, but they can tax you if you don't want to do it. That's what they said. Now, for those of us here who have French healthcare, have been here all of our lives, I don't see what the problem is here. And I would be hard-pressed to see if any of us in the table here would see this problem. Like, again, it's like visiting the Klingon Empire. What is this all about? I have found it very difficult personally to have any discussions with Americans or to even write about this issue, because I just come to it as an alien.
All right, and the U.S. president, just to give you a flavor of what the mood was like Thursday, watched this verdict from the Oval Office in the company of his vice president before he addressed the nation.
Here in America, in the wealthiest nation on earth, no illness or accident should lead to any family's financial ruin. Whatever the politics, today's decision was a victory for people all over this country whose lives will be more secure because of this law and the Supreme Court's decision to uphold it.
Meanwhile, his challenger in November vowing to repeal Obamacare by ousting Obama.
You can choose whether you want to have a larger and larger government, more and more intrusive in your life, separating you and your doctor, whether you're comfortable with more deficits, higher debt that we pass on to the coming generations, whether you're willing to have the government put in place a plan that potentially causes you to lose the insurance that you like. or whether instead you want to return to a time when the American people will have their own choice in health care, where consumers will be able to make their choices as to what kind of health insurance they want.
Dave Clark, now I'll ask you the question. How do you feel about going to what Craig Kopidis just described as Planet Klingon?
Well, I've arranged to have health insurance provided for me by the Caisse des Français à l'étranger. When I'll be over there, I growing up in Europe, it just strikes me as the first thing a civilized country does is provide healthcare for its people.
Absolutely.
And it's in the past weeks and months, because I've been preparing for my change, I've been reading a lot more about American politics, trying to understand it. And as Craig said, it's just impossible for Europeans to understand why this should be such an issue, why there should be belly dancers on the steps of the Supreme Court protesting or celebrating or whatever it was they were doing. I've never seen such an enthusiastic bunch of constitutional law fans.
Ulrike Kollerman, you're looking puzzled.
I think it's a shame that his challenger wants to scrap it. I mean, if he adjusts it, it's okay, but they really need such a thing. And it's so basic, and it just...
And his challenger introduced it into Massachusetts.
Right.
When he was given the
Which-
and
Massachusetts.
they are
They
far
were
from
saying-
implementing it, so at least they have a base now.
May I tell a brief anecdote, which I think hopefully it will put this in perspective? I have a dear friend from when I went to college in the States who is a right-wing guy. And he was over here a few years ago, and he broke his ankle. And I took him to a hospital in Sicily. They welcomed him, they x-rayed him, they fixed it, it needed a little operation, they put it up, and he didn't know what to do for the payment. And he goes up to the doctor and says, "How much do I owe you?" And the doctor just stared at him. He said, "You don't have to pay anything, we're happy to help you." He walked out of there a changed man. So I think that once you experience, what you were just saying, I think your attitude does change. I think it's a matter of personal experience.
And if it did save Americans any money, there might be some sense to the right-wing argument that it's about a big government, but Americans spend more per capita on healthcare than almost anyone else, and life expectancy is lower than most Western European countries and Japan.
It's also a very big country. It's Americans have this two bad habits. They want everyone to like them, and they want everything to be absolutely perfect. And neither you can have everyone has imperfections, and anything you do there regarding healthcare is not going to be perfect. Look, our healthcare here in France, which I think is fantastic, does it have problems? Well, of course it does.
Let's ask the Frenchman here. Tanguy Saman,
Yeah,
is French healthcare perfect in every way?
I don't think so, but at least we have an healthcare that every other country would like to have, basically. So, and we don't don't have to go as far as America. If you look at Britain, for instance, it's a big shame what's going on in Britain regarding the smaller incomes. They cannot afford to have healthcare.
But it's free, the National Health Service.
Free in the UK.
Yeah.
It pays in the UK.
Yeah, of course, but the system is not developed like it is in France. So we have a good healthcare. We have good protection. Maybe too good in some ways, because in France we are used to have everything, like every social protection, and we don't want to drop anything out of it.
It's a good model. What it is, it's a good model to study and build from and take the best and maybe remove
The rest.
what isn't good.
And by the way, lots of tweets on the heels of this decision, and many try to involve the United States neighbor to the north. We'll look at one from Van Summers. The Supreme Court holds up free health care for everyone. Screw this commie country, I'm moving to Canada, he says.
Socialist.
Canada, which has a universal health care coverage. Says tinge of irony in that one. And then Mia says, congratulations to all on today's Obamacare, or as we Canadians call it, Thursday. So a bit of smugness from the United States' neighbors to the north on this one. Before we go, another reminder of how times have changed. On a reception line in Belfast, the Queen of England shaking hands with the former head of the Irish Republican Army. The 86-year-old monarch smiled and kept on moving, respecting protocol. Northern Ireland's Deputy First Minister, Martin McGuinness, there you see the handshake, wishing Elizabeth II 1,000 welcomes in Gaelic, then in English. Afterwards, a reporter asked, Martin, are you true to your convictions?
I'm still a Republican.
Martin, how was it to meet the Queen?
Very nice.
He seems almost embarrassed there, Dave Clark.
I'm sure he never expected to do that, but I don't know how much difference it makes now. It's a sign of how far things have moved on since the Good Friday Agreement. That it doesn't seem such a big surprise. You know, the Queen has now been to Ireland 3 times and recently, after not going obviously for very many years, and it just looks a bit daft, doesn't it? The lady with the hat walking down the line of men in suits. She's shaken hands with a lot of people over the years, and a lot of really terrible people. So it's good that there's no violence there at the moment.
Because of course, adding drama to all this occasion is the knowledge that McGuinness may have been one of the ones behind the killing of the Queen's cousin, Lord Mountbatten, his yacht blown up in 1979.
That's true, but obviously McGuinness himself hasn't been convicted of that, but he's very much part of the movement that was involved in that. But the Queen gave a knighthood to Ceausescu. It's not unusual for her to meet people to whom she's politically opposed.
Cynic.
McGuinness, by the way, who was conciliatory towards the Queen, but who couldn't resist a dig at her Prime Minister.
People may be shocked to discover that Peter Robinson and myself have met the American President, Barack Obama, more times than we've met David Cameron as British Prime Minister in our role as First and Deputy First Minister. This lack of engagement by David Cameron is a serious mistake and may provide a rationale for some of the damaging decisions made by the NIO in recent times.
So peace is a long time coming, even in Northern Ireland, it seems, where with the fact that there is still this very uneasy relationship. They boycotted some of the receptions that the Queen attended in Belfast, Sinn Féin. Craig Capitas, when you look at that handshake, it matters, but it's not over yet.
Well, Her Majesty's a pretty nice girl, but she doesn't have a lot to say. I think she had a lot to say here. Symbols are important. They resonate. And perhaps I'm being too cynical myself, but I thought this had a lot of resonation. And it's only sad in this media world that it didn't have the same symbolic resonation of something along the lines of Janet Jackson's wardrobe malfunction, in which her breast spilled out onto the Super Bowl. Look, what the Queen did here was vital. What it showed was vital. Here are 2 countries who have been essentially having a religious war since the 1600s. Protestants and Catholics fighting each other, a lot of other reasons, but this conflict has been under the guise of religion. Where else are we seeing this in the world right now? And what you're seeing here with the Stormont agreements and going on here, sealed with the Queen meeting with McGuinness, is that you can have closure on this, or you can move towards closure. The 2 different people of different religions can get along. And the Queen is a very important person, although we may make fun of her with the silly hats and whatever. It took a lot of guts, I think, for her to go and do this. And maybe I'm being too syrupy, but I thought bravo, and I just wish that the resonance of this moment kind of went further than it did.
Do you agree, Ulrike?
I do. I think it was highly symbolic. I like the fact that the initial handshake was not on TV. What we've seen was only at the end. So they had their moment where there was no press allowed. I think it was important. And I also like the fact that all this happened in a room which was created. It was in a theater, and the room was designated for creative learning. I think that was very nice.
And Tanguy Salin, when you see the fact that it was the Queen that shook Martin McGuinness's hand, Martin McGuinness, who, by the way, gave an interview where he paid tribute to victims from both sides of the Northern Ireland conflict.
Yeah, well, we know how symbolic, as we said, how symbolic the Queen is in England. So definitely it makes sense that she's sending some kind of signal towards the British audience. The point now, as actually McGuinness pointed it, is if there will be some kind of political will behind this. Because until now, well, there is, like you said, some kind of unease, because politically speaking, it doesn't go very far. Britain is still very much reluctant to recognize their faults in this war, and this goes back to the Bloody Sunday. None of the British paratroopers who killed unarmed civilians have been convicted for this. So you cannot only shake hands. It's good. Well, you have to follow up the political reconciliation process. But at some point, you need to show that, well, you take the lessons from the past and you're ready to go over it. Until now, I don't think it's the case.
Can Northern Ireland's politicians sort this out on their own?
Well, they'll have to. We talk about the symbolic nature of the Queen in England, but I don't think anyone in England cares anymore where Northern Ireland's ruled from, whether it's Brussels or Dublin or London. I don't think anybody in England paid any attention to that whatsoever. And it's notable that what McGuinness said in his speech, that David Cameron is not engaged at all with the issue. It's just one of the poorer corners of the United Kingdom that is not part of his priority at the moment. The political parties over there, not the same political parties as they have on the mainland. When Martin McGuinness was elected to the British Parliament, he didn't swear fealty to the Queen, as he should have done if he was going to take his seat. Shaking hands with her, but he doesn't recognise her as his head of state. He's a Republican. Scotland is going to have a referendum. Scotland might move away from the United Kingdom. The United Kingdom might be over. They may no longer be a United Kingdom for this to be a symbolic act in. And so, if there is a long-term solution to there, it'll be the people of Northern Ireland and those leaders there.
There are no longer any bodies on the streets. People aren't being blown up anymore. And I think it's real important, given the current state of the situation in the Mideast in particular, as we were discussing before, that we remember this. If people aren't dying anymore.
All right, and that's where we'll leave this edition. I want to thank you, Craig Capitas, Ulrika Kohlerman, Dave Clark, who we wish a happy move to Washington for the French news agency AFP, and Tanguy Salat. Thank you for being with us here for The World This Week.